When I know in advance how many times I want to repeat the statement, that time I'll use the for loop. Python while loop is used to execute a block of statement repeatedly until a given condition is satisfied. The Python range function returns a sequence of numbers in a given range. Hello to all, a warm welcome to my new session on Python Basic. I'm your Revati ma'am, faculty from the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. So dear student, before going to start my today's session, let me to recall the topic what I have covered in my last session. In my last session, I started with control statement. So why I require control statement? In order to control the flow of the program, I required control statement. Along with that, we have discussed the different types of control statements supported by Python programming language. We discussed the different types of control statement which is supported by the Python programming language, that is if statement, that is simple if, then if else. Then we discussed if, elif, else. Along with that, we discussed nested if statement. Now, in my today's session, I am going to deal with looping statement. So, what is looping and why we required looping statement in Python programming language? So, dear student, if I don't want to repeat the statement, then I does not require any iterative statement. But if I want to repeat same task again and again, then I require looping statement. So, what is looping? Looping is nothing but the iteration, or it is just repetition of the work or repetition of the program. Now, if I consider Python, we have for loop and we have while loop. Now, let me to discuss for loop or for loop statement. The best example for looping statement is for loop. And why I want for loop and in which situation I am going to use the for loop. So, dear student, when I know in advance how many times I want to repeat the statement, that time I'll use the for loop. I repeat, when I'm going to use for loop, when I know in an advance that how many times I want to repeat the statement, in that time I'll go with the for loop. Anyway, dear student, we have studied what is for loop and how to use for loop in C program. Now, if I consider Python programming, see, in for loop, I can able to use if also. So, I can able to club if statement with in for loop. So, a for loop is used for iterating over a sequence. Iterating in the sense what? Repetition. And where we are going to use? We are going to use with range function and list and tuple and dictionary set as well as string. So, I can able to use for loop in the data types like list, tuple, dictionary, set and strings. Now, see here, this is the syntax. So, always for loop starts with the keyword for, and I want to specify the variable. See here, it is I is nothing but the variable, and I want to use the keyword in, and I'm going to specify the range. So, how many times I want to repeat? So, I'm going to specify number of sequence by using range function. Okay, and in my for loop, I can have the if statement also. So I can able to club the if statement in the for loop. Otherwise, directly I can go with for loop. So without using if statement, I can able to write the for loop. And what is the important thing I want to remember here? In for loop, indentation is very important. So dear student, Python does not include much syntax. In the sense, here we don't have any block. If I consider C program, Java or .NET, we have the concept called block. And how we are going to write the block? That is within the flower bracket. And here we don't have flower bracket. So here we have indentation. So I want to align the line. See here, this is my condition. If the condition is true, in the sense if this for loop is true, leave one tab and write the statement. And if I have only one statement after executing the for loop, okay, fine. If I have multiple statement and I want to place all the multiple statement in a sequence, and in my for loop, even I can write if, okay, even I can able to specify the condition. If that is true, in the else part, okay, see, if the condition is true, execute the statement. Else, go with the next statement. So here, it is definite iteration. When I know how many times I want to execute this statement, in that time I'll go with the for loop. So here I know how many times I want to repeat, that is 5 times. So I know how many times I want to repeat the statement. For that reason, I'll go with the for loop. And I'm going to have the body of the loop. So in my body of the loop, I can have the if statement. And if I consider if statement, see, if the condition is true, I'll execute if block, else I'm going to execute the else block. So in the false condition, I'll go with the else block. Now, let me to consider simple program here. Think that I want to print a number that is 1 to 10. Over. So, see here, for number in range. So, the range is how much? 10. So, I want to display the number 10. By default, the range starts from 0 to 9. Total how many times this for loop is going to work? 10 times. So dear student, let's see how this for loop is going to work with respect to range function. So here range is nothing but a function which returns a sequence of numbers. In the sense what? How many times I want to repeat this statement. Okay, so how I have written here? For number in range and 10. In the sense what? I want to print the number 10. In the sense I want to print 0 to 9. And how many times this for loop is going to execute? 10 times. So it starts from 0. So initially number is going to start from 0. Okay. And how many times? It's going to repeat 10 times. So 0 to 9, it is 10. And each time the number is going to incremented by 1. The range function is used with a loop to specify the range. Now, I'm going to club the range function with the for loop in order to specify the range of the for loop. In the sense, how many times I want to repeat the for loop. For that reason, I'm going to club range function with for loop. Now, I'm going to have if else in for loop. As I discussed, along with for loop, I can able to write if else statement. So see, what is the syntax? If condition. So first I'm going to have the for loop. In that I'm going to have the if condition. Okay, and I'm going to have block of statement, else I'm going to have block of statement. Now let me to discuss this concept with the help of program. See here, for I in range. So here, what is the I value now? It is 1. I'm going to initialize I with 1. Okay, by default, range function starts from 0. But here, I'm going to start from 1 to 11. Now tell me how many times this for loop is going to execute. That is 11 times. Now, if this condition is true, okay, now what I'm going to do? I'm going to check if I mod 2 equal to 0. What is I? I is 1. Mod 2 equal to 0. The condition is false. Okay. Now, it's going to execute else part and it's going to display odd number 1. Now, I is incremented by 1. So, range function here, I is 2. 2 mod 2, the condition is true. So, 2 is nothing but even number. So, this is going to continue up to I is 11. So, how many output I'm going to get? That is 11 output. Now, while loop. So, dear student, if I consider looping statement, we have for loop as well as while. And when I'm going to use for loop, when I know in advance how many times I want to repeat this statement. But when I'm going to use while loop, when I don't know how many times I want to repeat this statement. I repeat, when I don't know in advance how many times I want to repeat this statement, in that time I'll go with the while loop. So Python while loop is used to execute a block of statement repeatedly until a given condition is satisfied. How many times this while loop is going to execute? That is specified in the expression. That many times this while loop is going to execute. And when the condition becomes false, what's going to happen? It's going to execute rest of the statement. It's going to execute rest of the statement. And if I see the syntax, while as a keyword, and I'm going to have the expression. So don't forget to include colon. Then I'm going to have the statement. Now, let's discuss the flow of while loop. So, dear student, while, and it's going to check the condition. If the condition is true, it's going to execute the statement. And if the condition is false, what's going to happen? It's going to execute the other statement after the while loop. Now, my question is, when I'm going to use while loop, that is when I don't know in advance how many times I want to repeat the statement. So, while loop falls under the category of indefinite iteration. Indefinite iteration means that the number of times the loop is executed is not specified explicitly in advance. So, when I don't know in advance how many times I want to repeat this statement, in that situation, I will go with the while loop. Now, see here, I'm going to have the example. So, what is this? This is comment. Okay. In Python, to write the comment, I'm going to use hash. But in C, okay, fine. Even if I have multi-line comment, then I'll go with this. Okay, fine. Now, count is initialized with the value 0. See, I'm going to write the condition and I'm going to write the expression. So how many times I want to repeat this statement? 3 times. Okay. While count less than 3, what is count? Count is 0. Okay. 0 less than 3, the condition is true. What I'm going to do? See, here also indentation is very important. In Python, you have to follow the indentation. Then count equal to count plus 1 and I'm going to print hello to all. Okay, fine. Then what's going to happen? Control moves back to the condition. Now, what is count? Count is 1, 1, 1 less than 3. The condition is true. Increment count by 2. Now count is 2. Okay. Print hello. Now, how many times I'm going to get the hello? 3 times. And when the condition is false, so what's going to happen? The control moves to next line. Okay. So, in C, this is nothing but one block. But in Python, I need to follow the indentation. Now, I'm going to have break statement in Python. So, dear student, why I want break statement and what is the need of having break statement? So, dear student, when I want to exit from the block, when I want to exit from some program, then I'll use break statement. So, a break statement is used to terminate the loop immediately. When I want to terminate the loop immediately, then I'll use break statement. See here, I have for loop, even I have while loop. Okay, so for, while, in sequence, and I'm going to check the condition. Okay, after checking condition, what I want to do? I want to exit. Okay, so I want to come out from this loop. So what I will do? I'll call break. Now, even I can use break statement with while loop. So here, while, okay, then inside this while loop, I'm going to have the condition. If the condition is true, so what I want to do? I want to exit from this looping. So, we are going to use break. So, break in the sense what? Break statement is used to terminate the loop immediately. So, when I want to exit from the loop or when I want to terminate from the loop, then I will use break statement. Now, I am going to have the example program here. So, for I in range 5. So, how many times? I'm going to execute for loop 5 times. And I starts from 0 because range function by default, it starts from 0 to 4. So, how many iteration? Total 5 iteration. Okay. So, 0 in range, the 0 comes in the range. Okay, fine. The condition is true. If I equal to 3, break. But what about I? I is 0. Okay, fine. What I will do? I'm going to print I. Now, okay, I is incremented by 1. Okay, now what is I? I is 1. 1 equal to 3. The condition is false. So, I'll print 1. So, I got the output 0 and 1. Now, I incremented by 1. Now, I is 2. 2 equal to 3. The condition is false. So, I'll print 2. Now, what's going to happen? The range function returns 3. Now, I is 3. 3 equal to 3. The condition is true. So, what I want to do? I want to exit or I want to terminate from this for loop. So, when I want to terminate immediately, then I will use break statement. Now, dear student, I'm going to have control statement. Anyway, dear student, these are the concept we studied in our C program, C++ as well as .NET. But once again, we are going to recall the concept, that's it. But the way of writing the program is different, but rest of the things are same. In the sense what? The usage of the for loop is same. but the way of writing the program is different. That's it. So the continue statement is used to skip particular iteration. There are some time we want to skip certain line. In that time, I'm going to use continue statement. So the continue statement is used to skip the current iteration. Okay, when I want to skip current iteration, then I'm going to use continue statement. Okay, fine. See here, in my program, how many iterations I have? 100. Okay, after 10th iteration, I just want to terminate 11th iteration. So what I will do? I'm going to write the condition. If I equal to 11. So what's going to happen? Now, dear student, here, okay, I just want to skip 11th iteration. So what I'm going to do? When this condition is true, what I'm going to do? I'm going to write continue statement. And why I'm going to use continue statement? In order to skip the iteration. Okay, fine. Now, I'm going to have example program. See here, for I in range 5. So, how many numbers I want to print here? That is 0 to 4. Total, it is 5 numbers. Okay, fine. So, dear student, here range function returns the value 0. Initially, range function is going to return the value 0. Now, what is I? I is 0. Now, 0 equal to 3. Is it true or false? It is false. So, I'm going to print I. So, I'm going to print 0. Now, range function returns 1. 1 equal to 3. Is it true or false? It's false. So, what I'm going to do? I'm going to print 1. Now, range function is going to return 2. Okay, so each time range is going to incremented by 1. So, 1 plus 1, it is 2. 2 equal to 3. The condition is false. So, I'm going to print 2. Now, range is going to return 3. 3 equal to 3. The condition is true. Okay, so what I want to do? I want to skip this particular iteration. Okay, so I'm going to skip the number 3. Now, range is going to return the value 4. Okay, I is 4. 4 equal to 3. The condition is true or false? It is false because it is 4 and this one is 3. So, 4 is not equal to 3. So, the condition is false. So, what I'm going to do? I'm going to print 4. Okay. Now, how many iterations are over? It is 5 iterations are over. Now, range function returns the value 5. But here the condition fails. So, the control comes out from this for loop. Now, I'm going to have range function. So, dear student, just remember that I'm going to use range function with for loop. So, the Python range function returns a sequence of numbers in a given range. Why I'm going to use range function? It's a built-in function supported by the Python programming language. Okay, in order to generate sequence of numbers in a given range. So, if I want to generate 0 to 99, then my range function is 100. Okay, and if I want to generate 10 sequence number, so how I'm going to generate? Range of 10. Okay, why I'm going to use range function? In order to return a sequence of numbers and that is in a given range. And the most common use of range function is to iterate, in the sense what? Repeat the sequence. See here, if I want to print 1 to 100, it is just repetition, right? I want to print 1, then 2, then 3, okay, up to 100. So, in this situation, I'm going to use range function, and especially I'll use range function with for loop. Now, let me consider the syntax here. So, what is my function name? It is range. See here, I'm taking 3 parameters. Okay. So, here start is optional and step is optional. And what I required? I require stop. In the sense what? When I want to stop the range function. Okay. So, start, it's a optional. In the sense what? By default, range function starts with the value 0. Okay, and if I want to start the range function with some other value, then in the field of start, I want to specify the value. So it is optional. It's left to the user or it's left to the programmer. Next, stop. It is mandatory. So I want to specify when I want to stop the iteration. Okay. So next value after the end value of the sequence. So here initially starts from 0. So here it is n minus 1. Okay, what is stop here? What is the ending value? That's n minus 1. Step, integer value denoting the difference between two numbers in the sequence. See here. So each time the range function is going to incremented by 1. Okay. And there are certain time if I want to increment if the range function want to return some other value rather than 1, then I'm going to specify the value in the field step. Okay, so how I will write? Start from 1, stop 10, and each time increment the range by 2. Okay, so here start and step both are optional. It is left to the programmer. Return returns a range type object. So what kind of the object I can use here? I can use list, I can use tuples, I can use string. Okay, so these are the type of object. Now, let me consider the simple example here. See, for I in range and 5. Print I. Okay, now range starts from 0 to 4. Okay, I don't want this range. I want to specify my own range. Then what I will do? I'll start with for. Okay, then I'll write I in range. Okay, specify the value. So I want to start from the value 1, comma, when to stop, when it reaches 5, then each time incremented by 1. Okay, so by default, it is incremented by 1. Now, what is the output I'm going to get if I run this program? That is 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So, how many iteration? It is 5 iteration. So, dear student, please remember that I'm going to use range function with iterative statements. In that, especially with for loop. Anyway, dear student, in my today's class, I started with what is looping. In that, I have covered for loop and while loop. Along with that, I have covered the topics like break statement, continue statement and range function. Anyway, dear student, in my next class, I'm going to deal with exception handling. So, what is exception? What are the different kinds of exception we have? And to handle the exception, what are the keywords Python supports? All those things we are going to study in my next session. Anyway, dear student, from the examination point of view, exception handling is very important. So don't miss to watch my next session. Anyway, thank you for watching my session and thank you.